Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Get Real show. We are here with Chi, and I'm very excited to present this episode, really, because you have a bit of a different story than a lot of those that I've highlighted thus far. I know a lot of people have come on and talked about their recovery journeys and having problematic relationships with alcohol, but what I really find interesting about your experience is you didn't necessarily have a problem. You just decided to stop for health reasons.
Right.
So I'm very excited to get into that. I'm really interested to hear from your perspective. What were your initial thoughts as to why you stopped drinking?
Right. Well, first of all, thanks very much for having me on this
Yeah, of
episode. I'm really
course.
excited. So I started probably 2 dry Januaries ago, just on a whim. I decided, okay, well, I'm going to do dry January and let's just see how it goes. And I actually didn't really have any plan to continue past that. But February 1st came along and I found that doing dry January for that 1 month was pretty easy for me. I didn't really face a lot of challenges. So I just continued. And I noticed that it was having a really positive impact on my mood and my sleep. So I thought, well, if it's going to be this easy for you, then might as well continue and you're feeling great. And might as well just continue this journey. And there were actually a couple scenarios after that where I could have easily drank because I was in situations where there was a lot of other people drinking. So the month after, it was February, I actually went to the Super Bowl with my husband. And, we went to a couple Super Bowl parties and there was drinking going on, but I actually didn't feel a temptation or anything like that. I actually just drank Celsius the whole night and was totally fine. And, everyone else was dancing and I was dancing and I didn't really notice a difference. So that part actually was very surprising to me because I thought it would be a lot harder. For some reason in my head, I thought it would be much harder to stop drinking. And it wasn't. And then here we are, over a year later. And I feel after the 8-month mark, I really started to feel an increase in energy and my mood, my daily mood was just elevated. So it did take a couple months to get to that point. But when I reached that point, it just was like, I don't know why I would ever go back. And I remember in the beginning, I would mark in my calendar, well, now it's been 100 days, now it's been 200 days, just to keep track of my progress. But now it's just such a part of my everyday life that I don't even think about it anymore. It's just become a normal part of who I am.
Yeah. And a lot of health risks decrease also when you stop drinking, which
Right.
I know you were saying earlier, which I find really interesting because I never really learned about the full span. I know, like, yes, drinking is bad for you, but what health complications you feel like are decreased by the stop of drinking?
Right. So a big moment for me is that I turned 40 and I went to get my first mammogram, as all women should do. And the doctor presented she asked about my family history, and they can actually give you, there's a calculator that gives you what your lifetime breast cancer risk is.
Wow.
So for an average woman, it's 13%, which means that 1 in 8 women will develop at some point in their life breast cancer.
Wow.
And all of this information is easy to find information. It's very accessible to everybody. If you are a woman that drinks 3 drinks every week versus a woman that doesn't drink at all, then that 13% increases by another 15%. So it actually takes you up to 15%.
Wow.
So it's on a relative level. So instead of
Yeah.
13% lifetime risk, you're up to now 15% just from having 3 drinks every week, which
Yeah.
is really totally within a socially acceptable amount.
Yeah.
So that could even mean 1 drink Thursday, 1 drink Friday, 1 drink Saturday. That still counts into it. And then for each additional drink after that, it's another 10% increase on top of that. So it just multiplies. And this information was very easy to find. I just went to American Cancer Society website, and they split it out into like, what are the known risks? Like it's not even a controversial issue. It's not even like, oh, we're not sure. We've done a study. We're not 100% sure. They're sure.
Wow.
So that was incredibly eye-opening. And it was
Yeah.
prompted by me speaking to a doctor for a routine medical checkup and me deciding that I'm going to do my own research into this. And it, no matter what website that you went to, maybe the percent might be slightly different, but the conclusion was the same.
Wow.
So as somebody who is, you know, getting older, your relatives are getting older, and you have more exposure to people who are elderly and seeing kind of the health complications that they go through as they age, which is normal, then it starts to make you think, what can I do to prevent? There's certain things that I can't prevent. And some people might develop disease or cancer, and there's nothing they could have done because they just got unlucky.
Yeah.
But, you know, there's things that I could have prevented. So I never want to be at the point in my life where I'm thinking, what if? You know, what if I had done, like, I don't want to wait. Oh, like one day, like the doctor tells me, oh, I have breast cancer or I have this disease. Like, I don't ever want to put myself in a situation where I'm like, what if I had done this differently? So after knowing that information, wasn't even logical for me to proceed. I knew that I had to make changes in my life. And it wasn't because somebody told me. It's not even that the doctor told me that I have to make health changes. For some people, it could be triggered by a health event. But nobody told me. Nobody sat me down and told me. It was basically, I decided to do my own research, and I came to find all this information, which is perfectly accessible to everybody. And it was eye-opening.
Wow. Yeah, I didn't even know that at all, that it can increase your chance of developing breast cancer as a woman,
Right.
Which is already pretty high. 1 in 8 is an astounding
Quite
number.
high.
That's extremely high.
Right.
Thinking about just your friend group, it might be 8 people like
Yeah.
that. That is an alarming rate already.
Right.
And then to think that it tacks on so much higher of a risk is unbelievable.
Definitely.
I know obviously it does affect your brain. I know we both like Andrew Huberman, and then I like Dr. Amen too. I don't know if you know who that is. So
No.
he is a doctor in California, and he oftentimes has celebrities come on, and Miley Cyrus and all of them, and will scan their brain and does a lot of brain scans on people that drink alcohol regularly versus somebody who doesn't at all. And the difference even in pictures of the brain scan is wild.
Wow.
Just the difference that it can make, and how it affects your sleep, and how it affects like depression levels, and really everything that we already deal with. It just makes so much worse and intensifies.
Right.
So that's definitely alarming, but I didn't even know the link to breast cancer, because I know
Right.
obviously the liver cancer
Yes,
and things like
right.
that are pretty obvious, but you don't realize how much alcohol is linked to.
Right. And then that's not even talking about the liver risk, like you mentioned. So women are, while I was doing all of this research into, you know, like medical facts, so apparently women are at a higher risk of developing alcoholic liver disease than men.
Didn't know that either.
So, you know, that is for liver disease for cirrhosis related to the liver. And it's because of the way that our bodies are. So women have more fat in our bodies than men, and we have lower water content as well. So just the biology of it makes us more susceptible and more at risk for liver disease. Osteoporosis is another one. So women are at a higher risk of osteoporosis in general. And I'm not a medical professional. This is all information that I found on the internet. So if I'm able to find it, then I think any woman, or any man for that matter, can find this information, educate themselves. And with regard to the brain, so the Huberman podcast that you mentioned, so I thought that was one of the most eye-opening podcasts that I listened to, because he is a neuroscientist. He studies the brain. And he mentioned in his podcast that there was a study from 2022, so it was a pretty recent study, and they looked at 36,000 individuals in the UK who were generally healthy, and they were quote unquote normal drinkers. They drank at a low to moderate level. So what the study said was that, there's been a lot of studies on heavy drinking, and obviously that has a detrimental impact on your brain, which, most people would know that. But there aren't a lot of studies on low to moderate consumption. And is that beneficial? Or some people think it might, some studies say it might be beneficial if you have a glass of wine. So they really honed in on that. And they found that even low to moderate, so low meaning 7 units on average a week. So 7 units, half a pint is 1 unit. Half a pint of beer is 1 unit. And half a glass of wine is 1 unit. So two units equals one, like 1 glass of wine would be 2 units.
Wow.
So and it's on average. It's not that you have to drink every single day. It could be you had 3 glass, you had like 2 glasses on Friday, and then you had a glass on Saturday. That would be low to moderate, which is very socially acceptable.
Yeah.
So they found that, I think the way that they described it was the gray matter and the white matter inside of your brain. So the way that I understand it is that it's basically like your brain is a city. So imagine your brain is like a city, and a city has buildings, and then in these buildings there's there's workers in the buildings, there's neurons in the building, and then that's how your body and your mind is able to function. So there's decisions happening in these buildings. There's thinking. They're controlling the movements in your body. So that's the gray matter, and then there's white matter in your brain, and that's the bridges that connect, the roads that connect all of the buildings. So basically, even if you're consuming alcohol at a low to moderate consumption level, you're still damaging your brain. And that's something that happens naturally with aging. So as you age, we tend to forget things, or, we just don't remember things, or maybe our decision-making processes are impaired. You're actually accelerating that process by consuming alcohol. And I think there was another study which came out of Penn, actually, UPenn, and they talked about that too. They said if you have 1 unit per week of alcohol and you increase it to 2 units per week, that's like aging your brain by 2 years.
Wow. And that's 1 glass of wine.
Yes.
That's insane.
Yes. And that's on a chronic level, because, I would say like most people who drink casually or socially, that's still chronic. I mean, you're still doing it maybe every week. Maybe you take a week off, but, that would still be considered chronic, and you're doing it for decades of your life.
Yeah.
Wow. So, I mean, there, it's like there's studies that say this and there's studies say that.
Yeah.
But just the fact that could even be a possibility is enough for me not to want to participate in that.
Yeah. And even, most low to moderate drinkers I know drink more than 3 glasses a week, let alone 1. That would be most people that are low to moderate, I think, would have 2 glasses of wine here, 2 glasses of wine there. So you're already over the low to moderate, and then just increasing your chance that much more.
Right, definitely.
Which is very, very scary.
Right.
And to think that this isn't discussed more in our society is very strange, because it is definitely the norm to drink. And I personally believe, at least in New York City and areas I've grown up, I've been in Philly, New York, down at the Jersey Shore, that overindulging in drinking, and binge drinking is very normalized, let alone just regular, oh, let's have a couple glasses with dinner.
Right.
It's very, very, very acceptable in our society to like go out on weekends and consume far more than the low to moderate levels.
Yes.
And the fact that this isn't discussed is really strange, because I'm all for do whatever you want, but there should at least be education and knowledge where people can make these decisions knowing all the facts.
Yeah, definitely. And to touch on your point regarding like kind of the drinking culture in our society. So for sure, living in New York, I mean, like such a fast-paced city with so many bars and restaurants all over the place. I mean, it's just so easy. And it seems that a lot of times as well, you just fall into this, it's easy to fall into a default of like, well, I'm going to meet my friends. I'm going to socialize. So therefore I must drink. And that seems to be kind of a norm, like a socially accepted norm. But I found that is just, you don't need to do that. You can still like, I don't, it's kind of like I got to a point where I thought about why is socializing with people, why does that always rest on the shoulders of drinking alcohol? Those are two actually completely separate things that were paired together because of what society, decided. And I would say that a lot of my friends who I did used to go out and drink with, I told them I don't drink anymore. And to be honest with you, I haven't really noticed any difference. It's not like they cut me out of their social circle, or it's not like, oh, well, we can't hang out with her anymore.
Yeah.
And we can even actually do the same activities that we did when we were drinking together. Recently I went on a bar crawl with a couple of my friends, and I just drank non-alcoholic beer the whole time. And it was totally fine. Nobody said anything to me. Nobody judged me for it. And I felt totally comfortable with it. The places that we picked to go to, I wasn't the one who picked them, but they all had non-alcoholic options.
Yeah.
So that definitely made it a lot easier. But I don't think that because sometimes I'll see this on social media as well, that like, oh, well, I got cut out of, there's certain things that I can't do socially because I don't drink anymore. I mean, personally, I don't find that to be true. I think everything that I want to do and had been doing, I am still doing the same things that I did before. I'm just 100%. Not drinking. Right.
Yeah. That's really how I found it too. I was 21 when I stopped drinking, so there were a couple friends that were more party friends that I just grew away from.
Right.
But I think that's natural if your whole relationship was built on partying.
Right.
But if they're a true friend and you have other commonalities,
right,
they're still going to be your friend if they truly are. And yeah, I have the same experience that I can do anything I did when I was drinking. Just now I'm going to remember everything and enjoy it even more.
Right.
But I've seen like a slight shift in just what I want to do.
Right.
Sometimes like I don't always want to hit the St. Patty's Day on Stone Street, like those typical things. But every now and again, I will have the craving. Oh, I want to go out dancing. I want to go out with my friends. And that's totally fine too.
Yeah.
Just maybe not as often as I once did.
Yeah.
But there's no barriers of anything that I can't do.
Right.
And I'm really grateful. In New York City, I think it's really adapted the non-alcoholic drinks quite well.
Definitely.
I think it's really advanced compared to the other cities, at least to what I've seen.
Right.
Where I'm almost shocked if a restaurant or a bar doesn't have like not only non-alcoholic options, but like a good non-alcoholic option,
Right.
And that didn't used to be the case.
Definitely. I feel like even a random dive bar would have at least athletic or some option that isn't just water.
Yeah.
And I think it's totally become the norm. And I think it wasn't the case before, for sure.
Yeah.
Like even like fairly recent, maybe even as recent as like, I don't know, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, like you didn't see as many options.
Yeah.
So that definitely helps because like I think also learning about all the different options that are available is another, it's like something new and your brain's always craving novelty. So you want to like discover new things and learn about new things. And that's one of them is like learning about all these different drinks and, even like learning about how like, how are the drinks made? Like, how do they remove the alcohol? You can get really nerdy about it if you wanted to. It's like a whole new world to explore. And that definitely makes it easier for somebody who has made the decision not to drink.
Definitely. Yeah. Do you feel like you experienced any negative reactions at all or had any judgments about your decision?
Yes. So, I would say that the actual saying no to a drink, was actually a lot easier than I anticipated. When I went into it, I wasn't even sure if I could continue on this path. And I actually found that to be a lot easier. But as far as the reactions to my not drinking, I would say that that part was more challenging than I initially anticipated. And I guess it's because it's so ingrained in our culture and it's just such an expectation that people are kind of almost bewildered and confused that, like, why aren't you drinking? Like, are you pregnant? Are you on medication?
Yeah.
And it's kind of like logically, if you think about it, that's kind of odd. Like knowing all of the health risks that alcohol has, that it entails, drinking alcohol entails. It's kind of like you think about it, like that's not even logical, that you're being asked that. So, I mean, I find that actually if you make it not a big deal, if you bring it up and you make it an issue with people, 'cause this is one of the coping mechanisms that I've developed, is that if you don't make it a big deal and you just go into a social situation and, maybe you go to a house party, bring your own drinks. The drinks that you want to drink, or you have your NA beers before, you have your NA drinks beforehand, and you don't really bring it up, and you don't make it an issue, then that actually could be easier for you mentally, just to keep your own sanity. Because if you make it a big issue, then everyone's just going to pounce on it, and they're going to make it a big deal too, and then you're going to get all these questions about it. So, that's one way to deal with it.
Yeah.
But I've also noticed that my actions and my decisions have had an unexpected impact on others. So just the fact that, I brought a non-alcoholic drink, then people will ask, what is that? And then usually the response actually is, I've actually tried Athletic before and I couldn't even tell that it wasn't beer, or I've tried this drink before, I couldn't even tell. And it actually might subconsciously encourage them to think about their own relationship with alcohol, because you're putting, just by being there and not drinking, you're putting that issue on the forefront of somebody's mind.
Yeah.
And they might start to think about it. Well, maybe I should think about my health too. Maybe I should cut down, I want to be like alert tomorrow morning, so maybe I should not drink so much. I would say that the people around me, because I don't drink anymore, they probably at least drink less.
Yeah.
And for sure with my husband, I saw that as well, because I made a decision not to drink, and I didn't expect him to not drink. It was a decision I made for myself. I don't have any expectations on others, but to drink or not drink. But just the fact that I'm there and I'm not drinking, it does impact them. Because maybe it makes them think, or maybe, people want to have a drinking buddy, and like if they don't have someone to drink with, then maybe they'll be like, well, I just won't drink then.
Definitely. Yeah, I have found, like, at least in my family even, a lot of people just having the education around this. A lot of people have cut back drastically or don't really drink at all.
Right.
I know, like, when I stopped drinking, my mom never had a drink again, and she would only have a drink like honestly once a year at a party. But like that's the type of drinker she was, but she just kind of went with the sense like, why would I now?
Right.
Like I don't have to have that one drink at a party. It's not a necessity, and it kind of gives other people the confidence to be like, oh, I don't need to do that. And even like cousins, my little brother, like my little brother is at a very like party age, and he barely drinks at all.
Wow.
And just having the education around it, I think, is great. And I've even noticed people bring it up, like maybe someone at work or a friend or someone might just say like, because I'm not pushy about it, I never want to be pushy about it, I just want people to have education.
Right.
But I've noticed somebody might be like, yeah, I'm thinking about maybe like being sober curious, and they'll bring it up to me, and then once they bring it up, obviously I'll talk for hours about it, but I'm never going to be like, oh, that's bad for you or you shouldn't drink. But if somebody wants to come to me and have the conversation, I'm always going to do that. But yeah, I definitely think like in society people are getting more open-minded around it.
Yes.
But I have had people like that, oh, why? And normally I casually will just say like, oh, I have a drinking problem or something, and I'll just say it super casual to the point where it's like a follow-up would be silly. Like,
right.
I have a drinking problem. Okay.
Yeah.
So what would you do today?
Right. It's how you present it.
Yeah.
I mean, it's always how you present it. You know, if you make it a big deal, then everyone else will make it a big deal.
Yeah.
If you make it like casual, then they'll take it casually because they're looking for cues from you.
Yeah.
So.
And I actually prefer less of a, like, I think it's really, really nice. Like friends will, if they're having like a little shindig, they'll make sure there's something for me or something that's 100% not necessary, but very nice and considerate.
Right.
But I'm actually more comfortable with people just being like, just as relaxed about it as you would be someone drinking. Like if you're like, oh, are you comfortable with me drinking or should I not drink or something, that makes me uncomfortable. I'm like, no, do whatever you want, you know?
Yes,
like,
definitely.
I definitely don't, like, it makes me uncomfortable, obviously, if somebody is uncomfortable with the fact that I'm not drinking.
Right.
Because I'm like, it really shouldn't be any different than someone. It's just like if we were out to get tacos and I was like, oh, I'm getting the one with cauliflower and you were getting meat, like, it should be as easy as that. Like,
yeah.
and that's it. You
right.
know? Like, which is not always the case.
Right, definitely. I mean, I guess speaking on that, you know, people who are vegetarians who choose not to eat meat, I mean, you wouldn't be like, oh, why? Do you have a problem with digesting meat? Like, is there like, are you addicted to meat?
Yeah.
Like, I mean, that it just like sounds ridiculous that someone would even say that.
Yeah.
And it's just like, it makes you think like I got to a point where I was just like everything society is telling me is a lie.
Yeah.
You know, and then I was like, then I had to like talk myself off the ledge. Yeah. You know, and be like, wait, you still live in this society, so you gotta like learn how to function in this society. Yeah. I mean, it's just, you know, there's like it's almost like when you hear you know, someone has a problem, like an alcohol problem or, you know, alcohol abuse or whatever it is. We always tend to stigmatize and focus on the individual who has the problem. Yeah. Whereas I think the real problem is society as a whole has a problematic relationship with alcohol. Yes. And it's throughout various culture. I mean, it's worldwide, it's universal. Yeah. And, you know, the questions that we ask people who choose not to drink, logically, they don't even make sense. And, you know, maybe we can all, it's not just the people who have issues with alcohol that can question. It's also us as a whole, as a society. We should question what type of relationship we collectively have with alcohol and why is it doesn't need to be this way.
Yeah. Yeah, I just said this earlier on a different episode for something totally different, but applies to everything. Follow the money. Like,
Right.
why is society or is alcohol pushed so drastically in our
Right.
society? Because it's extremely profitable.
Exactly.
It's like I served for years. I know from working in the restaurant industry, that's where you make all your money is the
Right.
alcohol.
Right.
Even as someone sober, sometimes when a table doesn't order drinks, you're like, oh, like it's just drastically lowering the check.
Right.
And just as a whole, it's one of the most profitable industries in the world.
Yes.
Is alcohol,
Yes.
which is crazy. So then we think, oh, why is this an issue worldwide in multiple countries around the world? Because it's an extremely profitable industry.
Definitely.
Take away our desire to drink, and companies are not doing as well.
Right.
And it's also an easy sell, having something that is addictive and that you want more of. Not even if you don't have an alcohol problem, if you have a glass of wine, you most likely want a second one. Even if you say no to it, you most likely want a second glass of wine.
Right.
And that's just how the substance operates.
Right.
When you're buying a shirt or an eyeshadow palette or another product on the market, your brain doesn't instinctually tell you want another one.
Right.
So it's a very easy product to sell.
Definitely. And I think that the marketing machine that is like put forth by the alcohol industry is probably the most powerful machine that I've ever seen. And, a lot of it is targeted towards women. So, sometimes like you'll see, I'll see this like on social media or whatever, like just like, buy a bottle of rosé for like to raise money for breast cancer. I mean, like, how ridiculous is this?
That's ironic.
So ironic.
Yeah.
And then, just the whole image of like the whole, moms drinking wine culture.
Yes,
that's a whole
scary.
thing. There's merchandise around that. And it's a whole identity. It becomes, it's like these women, like it becomes a whole part of their entire identity.
Yeah. It's really in all of it. There's like the boss woman with the martini and the cocktail dress on, the mom drinking wine, the girlfriends with their margaritas, or something for every age group, every different like aesthetic style friend group you have. There's always a different way to market it or sell it into your life.
Yeah.
And I think as a whole, like, our society has done a brilliant job having us think from a very young age that it is glamorous. Like, it's very, very glamorized.
Right.
And we don't obviously see the flip side of whether it's someone in 30 years developing some form of disease or cancer from it, or the problematic drinkers with their head in a garbage can, blacking out, getting into dangerous situations, like all the negative side effects. Obviously, they're not putting on the billboards or in the movies of what actually can occur with alcohol.
Yeah. It's a huge irony is that it's something that's so glamorized in society by movies, by TV shows, by advertisements. But at the same time, if you have a problem with it or if you're addicted to it, then immediately you're stigmatized. So it's just this huge dichotomy. And it doesn't make sense, It's I think we all have like a small part to play in this. We can all think about like, what's my relationship with alcohol? And then also like, even like if I encounter someone who doesn't drink alcohol, how can I approach the situation? Because as you said, it's becoming more the norm. So I've met people just out socially who, maybe they'll still drink, but they might work like a non-alcoholic drink into the mix because, they want to like slow down a bit. Or, they have something going on tomorrow morning that they want to be fresh for tomorrow. So they'll work it in. And I think that's more part of the norm now.
Yeah, definitely.
but for sure.
Yeah. And with your experience, you obviously grew up out of America. And you said it was still very much a problem in the culture and world that you grew up in.
Right.
How do you feel like that affected your views on alcohol and drinking?
Sure. So I went to high school in Hong Kong. I went to an international school in Hong Kong. And I think that there was definitely an earlier, just because the drinking age is lower in other countries than it is in the United States. Not necessarily that there was an earlier exposure to alcohol, but just that, like, even going out and drinking at, bars or establishments, that piece is probably exposed earlier.
Yeah.
Because, here in America, you can't necessarily do that unless you have a fake ID, and then you got to get a fake ID, and like probably you would at least get carded and someone would figure out you had a fake ID.
Yeah.
But I guess in other places in the world, it's more laissez-faire. Like, it's just, whatever, we're not even going to check.
Yeah.
Kind of thing. And yeah, I think there was an earlier exposure to that. So I remember when I went to college in America, you would hear like people who were freshmen getting their stomach pumped. And then I remember thinking like, oh, this is amateur hour. Like that, this would never, because I was exposed to this culture much earlier. And but it's still a problem, it's still a problem for everybody.
Yeah.
And then I studied abroad in London during college. And there, I think this is probably universally known that the drinking culture is really huge there. I remember there was a pub in my dorm. There was a pub in every dorm. And there was a pub in the center of campus, like right in the center of campus. And they would have a party there every Thursday night. And it was just completely acceptable. And then some of my British friends explained to me like, oh yeah, when you're young and, even if you're a kid, it's totally acceptable to bring your baby to the pub. So I'm not sure if, it's twofold. It could be that maybe some people who are exposed to drinking culture earlier, they're more used to it and they don't have a problem with it when they leave the home. So that could be one scenario. Or they get exposed to it earlier and it just exacerbates the whole relationship that they have with alcohol. Everybody's different. I think for me and for a lot of people, being in, like, even in school, in college, at work, it's just so ingrained. Even like the fact of like having like a company holiday party. I worked at places that didn't have holiday parties because they knew that people would get crazy. So they just deliberately didn't have a holiday party. But I also worked at places that had a huge holiday party. And it was something that, was kind of a treat for their employees. And you weren't even expected to be at work the next day.
Yeah.
So I think that the fact that that's the norm, it's when you think about it, like after you stop drinking, it just, all these things seem strange.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I think it's really interesting. I used to have the view like the American system is flawed. If you grew up in Europe or somewhere of that culture where you're exposed so young, and when you're like 14 you can have a glass of wine with your mom and dad at dinner, then you would already have this exposure, so it wasn't as big of a deal.
Right.
But I've had multiple people on the show that grew up out of the States that have had issues binge drinking or drinking too much or finding the exposure not helpful. Right. So it really just seems like you can't win either way.
Yeah.
And that it can become problematic either way. And it is a worldwide issue.
Definitely.
I'm sure there's a select few countries here and there that don't struggle as much, but it does seem, I've met people from a decent amount of countries that do. So it does seem like in a lot of cultures, it just is a massive issue. So I guess the solution hasn't been found yet. If the exposure is good for you, not good for you, it sounds overall that everyone could benefit from just not partaking.
Right.
Not that I have an issue if anyone does. It's just I think that anyone could just benefit from it. There
Right.
are health benefits, or even the clarity of it.
Right.
I think sometimes it does wake you up where you do think, okay, so like how you said, oh, is society lying to me? Like once you realize like the misinformation on alcohol, then you start to think with other things
Right.
like processed foods and this and that, and you can go all different ways with it, but that sometimes what is normal and culturally acceptable isn't always the healthiest.
Definitely, definitely. And I think that comes with age, like at least for me. Maybe I'm a late bloomer, I'm not sure. But like at least for me it came with age and experience. Because when I was, younger, I there were a lot of things that I didn't question. Like I didn't even think to question them.
Yeah.
I just like accepted them as the norm, and then I thought, well, this is the way it is. I'm not like I didn't even think about it. But as you get older, you start to question, like, why am I continuing to do this? Or why am I continuing to behave in this way? And then, you just peel back the layers. And then suddenly you get to that point where like, everyone's lying to me.
Yeah.
And then you just talk yourself down.
Yeah. I think like overall people are just asking more questions nowadays.
Definitely.
And I like to hear out all different theories, and then like thinking back even a decade ago, if you started to say something off norm, you would just be like, oh my gosh, you're crazy, I'm not even listening.
Right.
Where now, like, I'll hear out any theory and then I'll use my own intellect to think about it,
Right.
digest the information, and then decide if I believe it or not.
Absolutely.
Or if I believe it to be true in my life, or beneficial or not beneficial, and either implement it or ignore it and be like, I'm glad that works for you, it doesn't work for me.
Right.
But we should all be questioning things and talking to each other and hearing people's opinions that are different than our own.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. And actually, it's interesting you bring that point, because it brings to mind. So I had an older person tell me that, a bar that only serves non-alcoholic drinks, that's impossible. There's no way anyone would possibly go to such a bar. And I said, well, there are bars that exist, even in this country that, that provide those options. And they said, I'll tell you why it wouldn't work. It wouldn't work because in order for men and women to meet each other,
What?
Yes. Then they have to drink alcohol. Otherwise they won't have the guts to approach each other.
Sounds like an issue.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, it's kind of tying in with your point. Like, we should all consider different opinions and also kind of challenge our own beliefs.
Yeah.
Because, okay, well, first of all, it's kind of like we have online date. A lot of people meet online now. So that already throws that out the window.
Yeah.
And, I've been to the non-alc bar here in New York. Heckett. And and I mean, every time I go there, it seems like there's a lot of people who are, sober curious, or they're interested. Like maybe they might drink, but they just want to go check it out.
Yeah.
So
it sounds like that person maybe needs to do some inner work, because I mean, obviously it's scary initially to go up to someone and shoot your shot, or try to like put yourself out there. You're making yourself vulnerable, you're opening yourself up to rejection. Obviously it's a uncomfortable experience, but it's something I think as human beings we need to go through in order to grow, and we have to learn how to do it while not having liquid confidence in order to develop as human beings. Because I mean, I definitely used to be nervous talking to like the cute guy, being sober, absolutely, but now I'm not. Maybe I'll be a little nervous, like have some butterflies or heart flutters, but still have to do it anyway, because that's how you develop. And, like, not just that, I mean, if you have it just teaches you how to have any uncomfortable conversation. Like the first conversation you have with a partner and the last conversation you have with a partner, a breakup, putting in your 2 weeks, telling your employer that something's not working for you there, like having a meeting with a client, like all of these things are uncomfortable and nerve-wracking, but you have to learn how to get through them. You can't just use alcohol to coat those experiences for you, because eventually you won't be in this situation to have alcohol coat it for you. If you're at work and have like a nerve-wracking meeting with your boss or a client or something, you can't just whip out a drink in the middle of the work day.
Imagine that. It's like Mad Men, like Mad Men era stuff.
Exactly. So I think that you definitely need to, even if you do drink, you need to learn how to do that without alcohol.
Right.
I think just for personal development.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and it brings up a really good point, is it's character development. Learning how to be in a social situation and maybe like doing things that previously you would only have the nerve to do if you were drinking. Learning how to do that without drinking and then realizing that actually nothing changed.
Yeah. And just, I think, putting yourself in uncomfortable situations. Like, I used to be the worst socializing with strangers without alcohol, and now it's a skill that I've developed. But even so, like, I was at an event this past week, and I went by myself, and I thought it was more like, I didn't really look into what it was. I just was like, okay, I'll go. And normally things I show up to, like, a lot of people show up to alone, and it's fine. This particular event, I walked in, it just seemed like everyone knew each other. I was standing in the corner, and I was like, oh my gosh, how do I even break into one of these conversations? Like, I had that initial feeling of just, how do I even do this? How do I even talk to anyone? And it was like nerve-wracking for a couple of minutes, and then I saw like a mother and a daughter about my age, and just slid over and started talking to them, and it was like a little nerve-wracking, and I did have that like uncomfortability for sure, but I ended up having a great conversation. So you have to have like the wherewithal to be able to push yourself and make it through those first few minutes of being uncomfortable, and then you might meet someone you would have never met or had an experience you would have never had.
Right. Because it's always the first couple of minutes where you're not familiar with a person, and then you find something that clicks with them, and then you find conversation, or you find topics that you can talk about.
Yeah.
And if you never do that when you're sober, then you're never going to know that actually you're capable of that.
Yes. That's a big thing.
Yeah, which sounds so obvious, but it's true. It's kind of like, I actually learned a lot about my own personality just from not drinking. Yeah. Because I had this perception in my head that like, oh, you know, I'm just like I'm pretty outgoing. I think that people would say I was pretty outgoing, and you know, I was like kind of like fun and, you know, at parties or whatever. And I always thought it was because of the drink. And I realized like, no, actually, I mean, it just seems so obvious and stupid now that I'm saying it, because, you know, it's actually because that's your personality. Yeah. It's not because you're drinking alcohol. That actually has like this much to do with it.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I feel like I was outgoing with the people, like my circle I knew. Right. Meeting strangers scared me. So I thought it was like only the alcohol that could make me that, like, that person that could talk to everyone. But then, yeah, it was a little bit difficult at first, like bringing that out of me sober. But now I'm like, I am that person that can talk to anybody, but sometimes you just need a little extra effort.
Yeah, definitely. And you again, you don't realize any of these things until you actually eliminate alcohol. Yeah. Because it's actually impossible. Technically, it's impossible to figure that out if you're still drinking, because you're not putting yourself in a situation where, you know, because you're still drinking.
Definitely. Yeah. And even like the person that said the non-alcoholic bar would never work. Like I used to say years ago when I was in Philadelphia that, oh, I wanted to do a non-alcoholic event. Somebody had said something very similar, like, oh, that wouldn't be profitable. And then COVID ended up hitting, never ended up doing one, and came to New York. They're everywhere. Right. So it's sometimes obviously like that is innovation at its finest. Yes. Like obviously it's easy to start a business like, oh, I want to open an ice cream shop. Well, ice cream shops can be successful. They can fail, but there's many models out there of
Yes.
them being successful. So of course you can do that. But doing something different sometimes can be the most lucrative because
Right.
you're first on the scene or first 10 on the scene.
Right.
To be doing something innovative and different and refreshing that could have a major draw, and then you're one of the industry leaders from the beginning.
Yes, definitely.
But a lot of people that feel like they couldn't do something themselves sometimes, I think, just say like, this is the way it is, you can't do that.
Right. And speaking of that, there are so many different business models where, non-alcoholic drinks can be incorporated into the social scene. So, I mean, you could have something like Hecate where it's, fully non-alc. Or there's even, breweries like Talea, that's one example, or Keg and Lantern I was just at last night. They have non-alcoholic drinks on draft.
Yeah.
So it's inclusive. It's just the inclusivity aspect of it, I think, is the key. Whether you decide that you are, a drinker and you want to drink, or if you decide you're not going to drink, but you still like the taste of beer or you still like the taste of drinks, then, there's an option for you. And I think there's a lot of different business models around that.
And at the end of the day, like most times, mocktails, non-alcoholic beers, all that is the same price as an actual drink.
Yes.
So it is profitable because albeit, $15 mocktail, okay.
Right, exactly. It is the same price.
Yeah.
Maybe you don't drink as many of them.
Yes, that's the one thing. Yeah.
Right.
But
I did learn that the reason why they're so expensive, is because the alcohol component of the drink is actually cheap.
Wow.
It's all of the other things around it, like the yeast that you select. Those are what make the drink, flavorful and interesting for people. And then as far as the actual de-alcoholization process, that machine itself is expensive.
Yeah.
So that's why I learned that is why they're so expensive. And, that's fine. If that's what it takes, and I want to be in a social situation, and I want to feel included with everybody else, then, I'm not going to drink as many drinks as you. So I'm probably going to save money relative to you guys. So.
Yeah. But I will be getting that mocktail.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. So there is a massive market for it.
Right.
For sure. Do you feel like being in the city, like being in New York, that the culture was really heavy around drinking as well? Yeah,
definitely. I mean, just the because there's more of everything in this city. And it's just like everything. So the other piece is that everything's so condensed. So whereas maybe in other cities, people would have to drive out to go from location to location, or if they wanted to bar hop or whatever, everything's just right there at your fingertips and you can walk. I mean, I used to live in the East Village. There's just so many bars around there, even on my one block. I didn't have to go very far. And, the Lower East Side is right there and everything. So it's just the accessibility, I think, which is, I think, pretty unique for this city. Just the fact that everything's so condensed and so close.
Yeah.
That definitely plays into the culture. Because if you're meeting up with a friend for a drink, it's almost like, I feel like in this city, there's so many type A people. So type A people want to be good at everything, right? And that includes drinking. Like they want to be good. They want to be like the best at work. Yeah. They want to be like the best, like at, whatever, like athletic endeavor. They want to be, they want to do the New York City Marathon. They want to do the triathlon. They want to be like, they even want to be ahead of you when they're crossing the street. They want to they're like, oh, I'm not going to wait until the traffic light turns. I'm just going to be ahead of you. It's just this type A culture.
Yeah. Yep.
And, you can choose to subscribe to that or not, but that includes drinking too. And it's crazy to think that drinking is something that people aspire to be good at. Because how ridiculous is that when you think about that?
Yeah. I mean, I was there. I remember, because I'm that way, like, have to try to be the best at it. And I remember, like, being at parties when I was younger, being like, have to the keg stand the longest.
Yeah.
Have to, like, just silly things.
Right.
Take the most shots. Like,
right.
Just feeling this need to, like, overachieve even in partying
Yes.
is wild.
Yes.
Because that's an underachievement.
Right. And even like overachieve and then be good at everything at the same time. Like
Yeah.
not only should you be good at partying, but you should also be good at like, you should party and then you should go to work the next day and be fine.
Yeah. I've talked about that on here before, like that badge of honor, that extra badge of honor being like, oh, I partied all night and I'm at work and I'm doing my job exceedingly well, or oh, I was partying till 3 a.m. and now I'm going for a 7-mile run at 6 a.m. and I only slept for 3 hours. Like that glamorization is really toxic.
Yeah.
Because then it's like just burning the candle on both ends to the max. Like you're not only indulging in a unhealthy behavior, but then you're putting more taxing pressure on your body afterwards.
Right, definitely. So I guess it's there's that aspect of the culture here, but at the same time, there's something for every, like there's literally anything that you want, you could probably get it in this city.
Yeah.
So that includes non-alcoholic options.
Do you feel like you've met a lot of people in New York that have a mindset like yours, that are sober curious or stop drinking for health and all of that?
Yeah, I would say that the people in the city generally are very curious. That's why they live in the city, because they just love the experiences and all the diversity and meeting different people in the city. That's why they choose to live here. And I think that I surprisingly, even like friends that I've had for a long time, have unexpectedly just mentioned to me like, oh yeah, I tried this non-alc drink the other day, and I'm like, oh, how do you know about that? So it seems that there is a lot of interest, and I think it's just because it's coming up in the culture.
Yeah.
So there's no way actually that you can avoid it, because maybe they'll see it on a menu, or they'll hear about it from somebody, or maybe they'll encounter people like you or me, and it'll just make them think like, oh, this person like has non-alc beers, or this person drinks this instead of, there's always alternatives presented.
Yeah.
And I feel like because you encounter so many people in the city, you're bound to encounter it eventually.
Definitely. Yeah. And you run as well, right?
I do. I mean, I've always been pretty active. I took a hiatus from running, but trying to get back into it. So definitely the whole fitness aspect plays into the whole health and wellness lifestyle. I mean, it's almost like there's like different pillars of your health, and they all rely on each other. Yeah. And it's like if you improve one pillar of health, then everything falls into place like dominoes. Yeah. So if you run, you're not necessarily going to want to drink, because if you drink too much, then you won't be able to run. Or if you place an importance on like sleep or your diet, all the pieces come together and they all play into each other. Yeah. So if there's one pillar that is missing from it, it doesn't make sense to not, like, drinking just simply did not play into the equation.
So you've seen it really help your fitness as well.
Yeah, for sure. And even just the fact that it's improving my sleep. I'm waking up consistently at the same time every day. And because I'm doing that, then I'm making enough time in my schedule to exercise. Whereas maybe before you would sleep in and then you wouldn't have that time slot to exercise.
Yeah, that makes sense. What would you say if someone is teetering on the idea of giving up alcohol, but they don't have a problem? They're just thinking, maybe it doesn't serve me anymore. What would your advice be to them?
That's a very good question. I would say just give it a try, but take it a day at a time. And you're probably a lot more capable than you could have imagined. Because when I started this journey, I didn't think honestly, I didn't even think that with all the societal pressures and all the opportunities to drink, I honestly didn't think that it would be an easy path. I didn't think I was even capable of it. And the things that you'll learn on the journey will surprise even yourself. So, I've learned things about myself that I didn't know before, for sure. It's because I decided not to drink. And then also the second piece is like lean on others for support. So on Instagram, I found a little community of people who are interested in, for example, non-alcoholic drinks. And, we'll group chat and we'll talk about different drinks that we've discovered and had. And we're all in different areas around the country. So we'll share what we found. And having a community for sure definitely helps, because that's the whole reason that I started an Instagram account in the first place, is just to connect with others. So, for sure utilize the resources that you have, and one of those resources is the community, the other people. There's a really strong NA community out there, and everyone's really supportive. Like, I met you randomly at an event in the city, and it's just, everyone's welcoming and everyone's nice, and everyone's different too, so you could definitely learn from their diverse experience.
Yeah, definitely. Do you feel like it gave you extra confidence in self, thinking, like you said, you didn't think you were capable and you are?
Yes, it's part of the whole character development that I couldn't have imagined. Sometimes when you do something, you're not so sure, and then you do it and you're like, so that was a lot easier than I thought it was.
Yeah.
And that this is definitely one of those things. I mean, I would say this is like one of the biggest life-changing things that I've done. And maybe subconsciously there were various reasons throughout the years, there were various reasons leading me to this path. But everything that you do, that you've achieved a goal. I hit 100 days, I hit 200 days, I hit 300, like everything that you do, it adds to your confidence level. And I think, for those that are thinking about it, like, give it a try, because you never know what could happen.
Exactly. Well, thank you so much for coming on
Thank
and
you.
getting real with me, from starting with dry January to now taking it completely out of your life. I think your story is amazing. And
Thank you
for coming on and getting real.
Thanks so much. I really enjoyed it.
Of course.